and welcome to Roll Wise, the show where we talk about things related to role playing games. We also play games too on Mondays if you guys are interested in watching some of our actual plays.
most of the
We
time.
like to test out the games, see how they play, make characters, do all that fun stuff. And we'd like to invite you for a little bit of time around our table. So tonight, we thought we'd take a suggestion and by one of our watchers, commenters, and stuff like that. They really appreciated and liked the game Castles and Crusades. Now, people know the game Castle and Crusades has been around for probably around 20 years, I think, is when I saw the first books coming around the early 2000s and stuff like that. And it was I guess the original premise was, first of all, the game is made by Troll Lord Games, led by Stephen Chenault. And they seem to try to capture like an AD&D with a more modern twist kind of vibe. So those people that have played AD&D in some of its earlier iterations can pick up Castles and Crusades and feel comfortable with the rules, which is probably going to be my problem, is I'm going to make assumptions about the game that probably aren't correct. And as I've been reading the Reforged edition, which I had just purchased from the website, you can get it for $50 if you buy the PDF and the book. And if you decide to sign up for your newsletter, you can get a little discount towards the first purchase. Just that way. So the premise is just like any other kind of heroic fantasy. You guys play the roles: heroes, villains, danger, intrigue, etc., dungeons, challenges, all the good stuff that go with that kind of story. And since tonight we're kind of preparing for our upcoming live play with this, we're going to make some characters and we're going to walk through the character creation process, see how hard it is, see what we remember, and see how low these guys can both roll for their character stats. So, are you guys ready to make some of the most consequential heroes the world has
Capable,
ever seen?
capable, ready to be hyper capable.
Hyper capable.
Very
Yeah.
capable.
Hyper
So,
capable.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I was surprised at how familiar the game felt when I was reading through the rules. Did you guys also feel that, or like, how did you guys feel when you kind of cracked open the rule book?
Oh yeah, it's very nostalgia game. Like it's very much a game where it's familiar in the sense that the AD&D style is pretty prevalent, I think, through the book.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Maybe third edition AD&D, something earlier than what we're playing right now in fifth edition and all that stuff. So, do you guys also have an idea as to what you want to play, so we can kind of plug in some of the information, or do we do what do you
Well,
want?
as was pointed out to me when I was thinking of characters pre-rolling dice, yes, I have some ideas, but I feel like that game plan is going to meet with failure. Um,
Okay,
I feel like my plan in the face of the enemy is going to, not
it's
work
gonna
out,
fall apart.
as the saying goes.
Biscuits and milk kind of thing, or whatever it is.
Uh,
So,
I think it's every game, everyone has a game plan until you get punched in the face. I think is what Mike Tyson said.
Yeah,
so the dice are doing the punching this time.
yeah. Because
Usually,
we'll be rolling 3d6 times and then assigning them to stats, right?
Yeah,
This
that's
this ought to
basically
be
the premise.
interesting.
So the first thing is that kind of when we go through the character creation process, the way that they've outlined, they want you to start with a character concept. I don't think that that's unusual for these types of games. So, do you want to be a noble dwarf fighter, haggard half orc barbarian? Like, where do you feel your concept is starting? If you guys want to give like a high level of what you're trying to shoot for, like a premise wise,
Okay.
uh, that can give I guess that
uh,
can give you a start, and then we can see how well we can match that concept throughout the rest of the creation process.
my idea was a dwarven rogue who started out as a locksmith's apprentice,
Okay,
who had some skill with locks and figured out he could make more money doing other things than being a locksmith.
fair enough. The illicit trades were definitely good supplemental income.
Right.
Gotcha. And Jeff, what about you? Where did you kind of see yourself?
Well, I figured I'd try to hit myself in the face as hard as I could, so I thought I'd try to do a half orc monk
Okay.
since I've had problems making monks work in other systems. because they're
And
usually, relying on other people to keep them alive for 4 or 5 levels before they become close to invincible.
Yeah, well, though I looked at the monk a little bit, and I was surprised by some of the stuff that I saw regarding the class. First of all, they have like D12 hit points as their hit dice, which is
Yeah.
different than I recall it being in D&D. So that's a
Oh yeah, that's
interesting
a lot
change.
more than because that's
It
usually
Yeah.
is. No,
that's usually barbarian hit points.
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it usually is. I'm going to try monk rather than barbarian, and we will see what happens. I'll see on the dice rolls. If
Yeah.
I don't roll anything above an 8, he may just become a fighter.
We might be two fighters because that was what I was thinking. I might default. I might have to default to too.
A fighter with a shovel
Two
or a
fighters,
rake.
and
Two
we're
fighters.
children, just because adults wouldn't have these stats.
No, I had a broken leg in youth, and now I have to it kind of drags when I walk around.
So much character development before we even get started. So I think that in this case, we don't really, since we're all theater of the mind for the most part, we don't really use VTTs very often or anything. Why don't you guys roll your stats, just using our offline roller, and then we'll explain to the people what we have and just read them straight down before you assign them to your 6 attribute scores. They have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And as you guys, anybody that's played the old D&D, so far they don't really. Those are the stats.
Why don't you
that
just roll
remember.
all 6, Jeff? Yeah. Well, 13.
Because
That's
I
not bad.
feel like I get screwed when I do that.
Well, we'll both get screwed then. Well,
So far, not horrible, but not good.
You're very average so far. That's a 13, an 11, an 11, a 10, a 12,
A 12. Wow.
and a
There it is.
4. There it is.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I was hoping for a 4.
All right. Well, here's all 4s from Brent.
4
Okay.
is rough to play
Let's
with.
see.
I'm
We
not
got a
gonna lie.
9. Oh, we got a
Ooh.
17.
Nice.
An 8. An 8. A 13. And an 11.
Well, definitely. That's very interesting. We'll see how that all plays out in terms of what you guys have. So, as I said, once you generate the scores, you distribute them how you see fit. Now, of course, they suggest placing the scores how you perceive your characters. Now, Jeff, I'm curious as to what your half orc, how you perceive that for to be incorporated into your character monk. With that, maybe.
Well, the obvious choice is to just eat it in charisma, since I get.
I was gonna say
-1 there.
he is just the ugliest goddamn person, both inside and out.
Well,
even though charisma in this game is a mental stat, right?
It
goes
is
with wisdom and intelligence.
I said inside and out.
So
I think I'm just disagreeable.
Just in this case, so that people know what the charisma dump is going to look like, it is this attribute represents the strength of attractiveness, willpower, personality, and leadership. It is the degree to which a character is able to influence others. The modifier affects a creature's loyalty and reactions to the character, the number of undead the character can turn, and all checks involving charisma. So very similar to what other D&D type systems do. So I don't think it's unusual for there to be a charisma dump stat. So we can see.
Well, I feel it. I'm trying to look at the monk, right? So the prime attributes constitution. Strength is probably kind of important.
Okay. Well, we can talk about.
I'll have to think. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment. So just as everybody kind of can kind of understand the class system in this, that there is a base of 13 classes in the game. Now, it's my understanding, because I haven't purchased any other besides the player's handbook for this, is that there are additional classes in other books. In the Keeper's Guide, it kind of elaborates on what you can do to do the classes and everything like that, as well as even in this guide. what it suggests is if you're putting together your classes and everything like that, um, you can kind of mix and match a class to create something that's kind of more unique to what vision you're trying to create. Although I think in this kind of like dry run through it before you, I'm one of those people that learn the rules and then start breaking them kind of people, rather than break them and then not understand exactly how you broke them in the first place. But they do suggest that when you do like multi-classing, class and a half, and you can kind of combine skills limitations of two classes into one, and kind of create your own archetype kind of thing. So 13 classes: barbarian, bard, cleric, druid, fighter, illusionist, knight, monk, paladin, ranger, rogue, wizard, and assassin. So pretty standard, except the illusionist I think deserves a little bit more conversation later after the fact. So we have monk and rogue. What about race? What did you guys have for race? You had half orc and dwarf?
Yeah, I think that was the plan.
I believe so.
So just so everyone's aware, the races are also fairly standard to the D&D. You have dwarves, elves, gnomes, half elf, halfling, half orc, and human. So the pretty common spectrum of the ancestries, races, whatever you want to call them, and all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the hit points that you guys will get are developed by your class. Do you want to choose option number 1, where you begin play with maximum hit points, with your Constitution modifier added or subtracted, or do you want to play with option number 2 and you roll your character's hit points the number of times equal to 1 plus their Constitution and take the highest roll? So basically,
maximum hit points.
Max, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Let's give us a little leeway on dying.
A little leeway on dying. Okay. So this is something that let's go ahead and dive into the classes a little bit more. And I think at this point, this is where it's going to be some good conversations about some of the changes between this and the earlier editions of D&D. Is that first and foremost, there is a process by which you create or derive primary and secondary attributes. I thought this was interesting because your primary attribute is determined by your class, and then most ancestries get one additional primary attribute that they can select. Now, humans actually get 2 additional primary attributes that they can select. And these are pretty important because when you do an attribute check, if it's something that includes your primary attribute, that determines your base difficulty. So your challenge base, if it's your prime attribute, is going to be a challenge base of 12. And if it's a secondary attribute, it's a challenge base of 18. So anything that's not considered a primary attribute is going to start off at an 18 kind of a target number, and then that's going to be modified by the castle keeper and everything like that as determined how hard the challenge is. So it's important to know that. And what's also really interesting is that some classes, and I don't think, let me check and see if this is a monk thing, but some classes actually have their primary attribute not actually match the ability check attribute that's most commonly associated with their abilities. So in Jeff's case, and we'll use this one because this is a great example, the prime attribute for a monk is Constitution. They work on their body, steel body, iron body, whatever you want to call it. They have D12 hit points, but then when they have abilities that require an ability that requires a check, it requires a dexterity check. So if you did not choose dexterity as your other prime attribute, that means every time you tried to deflect missiles, your base whatever would be 18 instead of 12. So it would make it harder for you to use those abilities. That makes sense, Jeff?
Not overly. Where are you seeing that? I'm sorry.
Just in the class section. If you go to page 50 on the classes, you'll notice that you have abilities. 50. So like you don't get an ability that has an ability check associated with it until 2nd level.
Oh, like the rogue says climb dexterity. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the monk says the prime attribute's Constitution.
Yep. So that means like in the rogue's case, your first level stuff, you're like, for example, if you dexterity is going to be easy for you. So any ability that has a dexterity check associated with it, it's going to fall into that prime attribute. And anything that, so if you choose dexterity and intelligence, for example, then you would be better at deciphering script. However, if you were wanting to listen, you would not be as good at that per se. Kind of weird, isn't it?
Well, I'm not going to be good at more than one thing, anyways. So
You're going to be really good at one thing. Kind of.
But this is
No, you're going to
where,
be kind of okay at another. You got a 13.
I'll
but
be a good
like,
rogue, and that's about it.
but like humans, for example, because they have two additional prime attributes, can cover their bases in terms of being able to kind of maximize the abilities of a class. So it is a very important thing that they get out of that.
And that's offset by the fact that the other races get stat bonuses.
You
Like
get
a dwarf
stat
gets
bonuses.
plus one con, -1 agility is what
Well, and
dwarves
they
get.
also have special racial abilities associated with them and stuff like that, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But yeah, that's, I think that those are some pretty interesting things. So for the monk, let's just finish up talking about the monk for Jeff and everything like that. So their prime attribute is Constitution. Their hit points are D12. Their disposition is any, and they have a long list of weapons that they can use. But Jeff, what armors can they use?
Usually monks can't use any of it. I have it. Yeah, no, cannot wear bulky and heavy armors or
And in
objects
their
that weigh
class,
them
it says
down.
none. So you get nice, loose fitted clothing, according to this. Um, and what are the abilities that you get at level 1 for monk? Can you explain those?
You get fast movement, so you can move an extra 5 feet around. You get Iron Body, which is +1 versus poisons, toxins, paralysis, polymorph, petrification, and death. You get a stun attack, which can be used once per round and one time per level per day. And then you get hand-to-hand combat, unarmed attack, and AC, a +2 bonus to overbearing and grappling. Oh, good. So you better learn the overbearing and grappling rules.
Always
Apparently,
easy,
we'll be doing that a
always
lot.
easy, always easy in these games.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and that, it's definitely a part of combat I'll be curious to see, because I think grappling rules have always kind of struggled in D
They're
and
always
D.
interesting,
Like I felt that they
not in a
never
good way
really,
sometimes.
they kind of suck in my opinion. They've always struggled. So Rogue. Let's go ahead and get to Rogue. So explain Rogue for us, Brent. That's on page 69.
Yeah,
So
what
they
do you
got
want me to review?
uh,
D6 hit points. Their prime attribute is dexterity. They have a list of
mhm,
weapons. They can wear leather coat, and padded armor. And they have a host of the kind of the standard suite of rogue abilities. Back attack, uh, thieves can't, climb, decipher script, hide, listen, move silently, open locks, pickpocket, and find disable trap. The interesting thing is decipher script, listen, and find disable trap are all not dexterity. Find disable trap is an intelligence thing. Listen is wisdom, and then decipher script is also intelligence. So that's kind of interesting.
mhm. Yeah. So kind of makes it. It allows you to kind of see where you could be a better thief. So if you wanted to do the wisdom approach, then you could get you could listen to noises better, I guess, et cetera, et cetera. So I also like that they use the thieves cant in this game. Always appreciate it.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. And then now, once you've gotten that part, I mean, pretty much you'll take your character sheet, list your abilities like you would in any normal D&D thing and all that stuff. And then we get to choose races. Then you guys actually chose races that were, I think, interesting. Because of just to kind of see how they fare against the other stuff. Um, you got Jeff and your half orc. One of the things I thought was weird is that half elves have a with lineage, a human lineage approach or an elven lineage. Like you could actually be more related to one of your two lineages in terms of like abilities and stuff like that. Whereas half orcs don't seem to have that for some reason. I thought that was kind of a strange, like,
Well, I believe the old school philosophy behind that is it's like what culture you're raised in,
mhm.
and orcs have a difficult past with that sort of thing.
Yeah. So it just I thought it was since they were doing the which the thing that kind of lineage approach with the half elves. I thought that would be interesting if they'd have done it with the half orcs too. Um, but one thing that they do in terms of like the races and everything like that is they talk about their descriptions. Of course, like what are the typical half orcs look like. They talk about personality. So like Jeff, what kind of personality if you want to give a summary from what they described in the book, like, what are they typically described as?
Sorry, I was starting to fill out my character sheet. I didn't hear what you're saying, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Well, personality. So like half orcs have an unsavory and contentious individuals. As outcasts, they have few allies or friends. So, and they often live miserable and lonely lives, wary of all. So that's your typical half orc life experience.
Yeah, they're not
Um,
super fun with other people. Sure.
No, maybe good for a monastery because as an outcast you kind of found umbrage in the only place you could. Um, then they do have racial affinities in this, and so they talk about how their race interacts with other races, other common races. And half orcs typically care only for themselves and themselves alone, avoiding even their own kind. No race finds them likable, and they return the favor. Half orcs are often found with orcs or smaller goblinoids, as those are the least discerning of the races and are easily dominated. Other half orcs tend to be found in larger human settlements, where if they're lucky, they can find a certain degree of anonymity. Mm, kind of a chip on their shoulder. And then, of course, last but not least, they talk about the environments that half orcs are found in. So, half orc traits: they have dark vision, enhanced sense of smell, and martial prowess. Brent, what about you and dwarves? Did the dwarf match up with your fantasy of dwarves, or how did
Well, I
that
mean,
go?
it's definitely very Tolkien inspired. Like they have animosity of elves, which is kind of different. Most games don't have that sort of stuff anymore. But they have deep vision, uh, determined depth and direction, good in caves, like most of it. Anonymity, goblins and orcs, defensive expertise, giants and ogres, resistance to arcane magic. Yeah, that's pretty standard, like standard AD&D style
Mm-hmm.
um, dwarf with all of the dwarf abilities that normally come with it.
So, one question I have for your ragtag party is that how when they talk about the enmity for goblins, orcs, and their kin, how do you guys think you'll pair up? Considering half orcs are hated by everybody, and dwarves definitely dislike them even more. So, is session one just a PvP session as you guys sort it out, or?
I think that'll come up in play. I mean, he's probably not too fond of the fact that he's uh, on half work, but circumstances have probably put us together, so we make the best of what we have.
Yeah, kind of a progressive, like, well, he's not as bad as the other guys. Do what you can with what you got.
Well, it's just necessity, I think, more than anything.
Sure.
Depending, I mean, depending.
Um,
I don't know what sort of like scenario we're going to be thrown in, but necessity breeds strange bedfellows.
sure. So one of the things that they do with races, they talk about languages. So they have a list of languages that are common to each race. Common, dwarven, gnome, goblinoid, halfling, elven, ogreish, giant, and troll are the dwarven languages, for example. Your size and your movement are also determined by your race. So size small, movement 20 feet. Typical classes, they say that these are the most commonly associated classes with the race in question. So dwarves tend to be fighters, rogues, barbarians, clerics, and bards, as
Does
well as modify.
size actually make a difference? Like, what does size do in this game?
Good question. I guess I don't think it. I don't think it
Because
does.
that's interesting. Because usually dwarves aren't small. Even in AD&D, I think they were medium. Like halflings and gnomes were small. But so that's interesting.
I
Yeah,
think
I guess.
depending on what height you pick, you could wind up being small and or medium.
Well, this defaults them to small size.
Mhm.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So well, let me double check. I guess I didn't read that part specifically. That might be in the keepers section. Let's see.
No, it
How do
does.
I-
Defaults at small.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Okay, well, I'll look that up in just a moment. PDF decided it was going to stop loading for some reason. There we go. I blame technology.
Usually it's appropriate to be blamed.
Okay, so size. Size. How do you spell size? H-I. Nope.
We can look it up later. It's fine. It's not going to make a difference. I'm not going to pick a different character. So
It's not gonna change. I might be dumpstatting intelligence.
my character is fully prepared to make bad decisions. With an 8 wisdom and an 8 intelligence.
Okay, here it is. Each race varies in size, but fall into the broad category of small or medium. Small indicates a height of between 3'6" and 4'5". Medium refers to the height of between 4'5" and 6'9". I do know that movement for dwarves is 20 feet, so they are definitely a lot slower in this than human counterparts and everything like that. However, height for dwarves can be between 3'10" and 5'2", and that seems taller than I remember dwarves. So you could technically be a medium creature.
I don't think game wise, I don't think that's true though, or they wouldn't say it just defaults to small.
Yeah, because I know that in most D&D games, like your size, like differences in size matter, for hitting and stuff like that, or certain other combat type deals.
Yeah, it usually
Also,
matters for like your defenses against larger characters.
or if armor could fit you or something like that. So like encumbrance could also impact your, or be impacted by your size and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's a lot of ways in which we'll find the size matters. So okay, so half orcs and dwarves. So now that we've got the creating the character for those guys, hit points. You guys have 6 for the rogue and 12 for the monk, plus or minus your constitution modifier. And just so you guys
And what are the
are
constitution modifier? I was trying to look for that stuff and couldn't find it.
so the attribute modifiers are fairly similar to what they were in D&D. So 9 to 12 is a 0. A 13 to a 15 is a +1. A 16 and 17 are +2, and an 18 and a 19 are +3.
8 hit points.
A 6 to an 8
Or no, sorry, I have 6 hit points. I'm dumb.
6 to an 8 is a -1. A 4 and a 5 is a -2. A 2 and a 3 is -3, and a 1 is -4.
Sorry, the 4 was -2, or was that -3?
-2.
Yeah, I've got 2 negative modifiers and only 1 positive one.
13 is a what? +1?
+1.
Okay. And a 16 is +2, right?
Yeah, so slightly different because I think 18 was a +4 in D&D. So.
Well, and I think 11 to 12 is a +1 in D&D, 5th edition. 10 is not. 10 is 0, and then I think 9. I think 10 is 0, and 8, 9 is -1.
So somewhere around there. I haven't played D&D in a long time.
That's why I
And
usually shoot for the breaking point of 10s, just so I don't have a -1 there stuff.
Sure. All right. So do you guys have thoughts on what uh what secondary or what second primary stat you guys were going to go with?
I was going to do charisma, just so I can be the kind of face of the group.
Okay. And Brent, what about, or sorry, Jeff, what about you?
I think I'm going to use Dex. Doesn't specify a lot of information about, like, it just looks like all the monk checks are con except for dodging missiles. So
You mean like in terms of like the attribute checks?
yeah,
And so you were going to choose dexterity.
yeah, Constitution first and then Dexterity.
Okay. Seems like a wise choice.
Yeah,
All
because none of
right.
the other stuff mentions anything like strength. So
Yeah, and that's fine. Once you get your primary and secondary attributes and everything like that done, and you have your attribute classes done, pretty much at this point, we have the fleshing out the character component. Um, and so the completing the character, they start to talk about like these are the kind of flair and everything like that. So persona, how is your characters what is their persona? How do they carry themselves? What is their appearance?
What does
Um,
disposition mean?
so disposition, the next one on there, it actually kind of represents their moral outlook and their worldview. So they say disposition, and a lot of people, talk about alignment in D&D. That
Mhm.
kind of seems to be the analog between the two, because they do break down disposition in that same kind of like there's a good and evil, there's a law and chaos, and then there's a neutral that you can be. And you basically choose a combination of two of those to create your worldview. But based on how you place them, it actually affects how your worldview is slightly adjusted. So, like in D&D, you would just be lawful good, whereas in this, you can actually be good and law, or law and good. And if you believe law is first, then you believe the rule of law it is vital. But if it's not moral, it's just doomed to fail. But for those who believe good is first, the moral society is more paramount, and so laws without morality need to be rebuilt with morality included, kind of thing. So like you would assume that in the one case, even though the law may not be good and it may not be moral, you would still believe the law would be tantamount, as opposed to the good person would try to change the law to be better, is my read of it. And you can have any combination of them. Lawful evil is still a person who uses the law to their advantage and everything like that. And so I think it fits most of our understanding of how these different things work. But did you guys have an idea as to, like, based on your own perception of alignments and these dispositions, where you'd find yourself?
Neutral chaos with neutral first, I believe, is probably my character. He's kind of
Okay.
self-centered.
So those who list neutral first most likely view the cosmos as something that is inherently chaotic. They may have a nihilistic worldview and are not committed to individual liberty or chaos. They simply believe it's unavoidable nature of the cosmos. Does that sound like your
Hmm.
dwarven lock pick? Okay. And just so and everybody knows that the actual dispositions can be influenced by the character classes themselves. So while I believe the rogue can have any disposition and the monk can have any disposition. For example, not a knight, a paladin, for example, would have disposition law good or good law. They have to have those dispositions.
Right.
So, what about you, Jeff? Where do you find yourself in terms of dispositions?
Probably just neutral.
Okay, so with neutral, you can choose neutral. Do you have like a leaning though?
No,
You could do neutral neutral, couldn't you?
they have a choice for just neutral.
Oh.
Yeah, you can do neutral neutral. Neutral neutral is just characters of this broad disposition typically believe in the balance between law and chaos and between good and evil. They seek to maintain existing social institutions while they simply wish to keep to themselves. So that seems maybe where you're at, or no?
Yeah, I think so.
Harmonious balance, the orc monk.
All right. So dispositions are done. And then once you get done with the dispositions, you get a name. And in this game, they suggest, paying attention to culture and everything like that. So we can come up with a name now, or we can come up with that for the first play.
Oh yeah, I'll have to think about it. That's kind of interesting. For an old school game, like character creation is pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, reading through all the different characters types and everything like that would take some time, but it doesn't seem very hard to get started. Which is kind of a nice feature. And we have enough rules to play. Maybe not all the optional rules and everything like that, but enough of those. There's also choosing a deity, which if we go with like the standard world of Castles and Crusades, they have their own deity list. Um, or if we chose just a homebrew world, we could do that too without worrying about the gods too much.
I don't think my character thinks about that much.
And I think the last thing on the list is equipment. Now, this is where equipment encumbrance and everything like that. This is probably Brent's least favorite component here,
I just don't like the amount of bookkeeping that it usually requires.
which this does require a little bit of bookkeeping. So, as a rogue, you have your starting goal to 3d4 times 10. So you actually can have a range of 30 to 120 gold pieces.
All right, 3d4 times 10.
And as a barbarian, not a barbarian, but as a monk, you get 2d4 times 10. That, I guess that foregoing all the worldly goods has taken its toll.
I did that wrong. Did you say 3d4?
3d4, that's correct.
I have 40 gold.
Perfect.
I have 80 gold. I'm retiring.
That's a lot of gold, man. Right in average, actually. So the one thing, like, I don't know if I want to necessarily go through the picking equipment and all that stuff, but I think there's important components to talk about equipment. But what questions do you have, Brent?
So there's no starting gear. Like we actually purchase from the amount of gold that we have, the stuff that we want from that list, right?
Yeah, I didn't see a starter kit like they've done in other games. So in this one, they actually force you to kind of like go through and pick a donkey or whatever it is.
I'm willing to bet a donkey costs more than 80 gold. And if it doesn't, you're in trouble.
Whatever, man. But there are things like, there are bandages for 2 wounds and everything like that. So there's a lot of miscellaneous equipment and everything like that they talk about. Now, the one thing I did want to mention is when you're looking at each piece of equipment, for example, each piece has a cost. And if it's like an armor, it will have an armor class, it'll have its weight, and then it'll have its EV, encumbrance value. Now, what they decided in this is that they decided to like use an encumbrance value that's derived from your strength to determine how encumbered you are at any given point. And what they also did is they made it a little bit more complicated by including bags that can have their own encumbrance value, but have a certain amount of stuff that you can put inside of it. And so I'll give you kind of like a little bit of an example here. Is that if you had like, are you gonna have leather armor, Brett? Do you think?
Yep.
Okay, so you would wear leather armor.
Oh, a mule's only 25 gold. A
Mule?
donkey's 8 gold. Jeez.
Yeah, well, donkey's 8 gold.
We have a donkey.
So leather armor is 10 gold. Its AC is +2, and you get an encumbrance value of 2. So that's like, so to start with, you'd find yourself at a 2. So when you're determining your encumbrance and everything like that, your encumbrance rating equals your strength score, and then it's modified by your prime attributes. If the character has either the strength or a constitution as a prime, they may add 3 to their strength score to determine their encumbrance rating. And if the character has both strength and encumbrance as a prime, they may add 6. So like for Jeff's case, because you already have that as, your prime is constitution, boom, you get a little bit of a benefit there. And so your encumbrance rating determines the amount of encumbrance values the character can carry before being burdened. So in Brent's case, by having leather armor, if he was wearing nothing else, he would have an encumbrance value of 2. And what's your strength, Brent?
11.
So because your strength is 11, 2 encumbrance value, you're considered unburdened.
And however, we're burdened at what? When we hit 11? I would be burdened when I hit 11, or is it half?
Yeah, when you hit 11, you're burdened. And burdened goes from 11 to 33. So it's 3 times your encumbrance rating.
Wow.
And then you're considered overburdened when you're more than 3 times your encumbrance rating. So the hard part about it is that then you also get things that are capacity items like backpacks. And so in their example, for example, good job, Mike. A backpack with a capacity of 8 can carry up to 8 items whose EVs are 7 or less. So that means you can have a bedroll, a hammer, 50 nails, and 1 torch, and that's 5 items in your backpack, and it counts as, instead of the 13 EV that each of those individually would count as, they count as, I think it's EV2. What is that?
EV is your encumbrance value?
No, yeah. So it's the backpack's encumbrance value would be 2. So instead of the higher encumbrance value that it shows there, it's actually only 2 instead. So you kind of can cheat your encumbrance value a little bit by using backpacks and pouches and stuff like that, or sacks. A large sack can do a lot of good for you, in terms of being able to manage your gear and everything like that. So that's just an FYI. That's how they kind of expect you to carry a lot of the little tiny things that could add up really quickly. All right. So I don't think we need to talk about each individual item that you purchase, other than maybe when we start and all that. But just so you guys are aware, if you're unburdened, there's no effect, obviously. But if you're burdened, you get a minus 10 foot to your character's move score to a minimum of 5 feet, and a +2 challenge level to all dexterity-based checks. And if you're overburdened, your move is reduced to 5 feet per round. You automatically fail all dexterity-based checks, and you lose your dexterity bonus to AC. Past that, I mean, there is magic and everything like that. Doesn't seem like you guys will be dealing with a lot of the magical components of this. But the magic system in this is pretty interesting. I do think that they get a shout out for having illusionists not be just weird, like pyrotechnic types where they cast like mirror image and all that kind of stuff. Because illusionists in this game can cast healing magic, and it heals people because they change reality.
That's interesting.
I thought it was super cool. Like, I mean, kudos to them for making illusionists more interesting than just, like a cast prestidigitation and make sparks fly from my fingers or something like that. But that's it. I mean, did you guys have any questions, or do you guys have other spots on your character sheet you need to fill out? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. It's interesting
No, I just got to figure some stuff out.
because like I said, it's one of those things where I don't know if we've done a lot in that scene, so done a lot of this particular type of thing, or if it's just that so it's familiar, or if it's just that easy, because that's pretty quick, really, the way that
Hmm.
um this worked out. So I think that's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
Well, I mean, and none of us were a magic casting class, so that probably helped.
Well, picking spells is always like pain in the
Because
ass.
then you have to choose spells and decide what your preparation stuff is and all that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
there could be some extra length for doing those kind of things. Um, and the magic system seemed like it's very similar to the whole Gygaxian, like, oh, you have to memorize a spell to
It's
learn it.
Fancying is the
Sorry,
word.
Vancian, that's the word. You are correct. I am wrong. Asterisk. But
Gygax stole it from Vance.
good point. But the whole Vancian magic system and everything like that, where you have to memorize spell slots. They talk about how you have to spend 5 minutes per spell to
Yep.
memorize them and all those kind of things. So I thought that was, kind of harkens back to the original thing. They also have on your character sheet the ability to mark off how much ammunition you have. So I'm sure you guys will love
Gross.
that.
So can we be assumed that we have clothes, or do you want us to actually buy clothes?
Like, I mean, what do you mean by clothes? You mean just like travel clothes?
Well, I mean
Or do you mean like,
like they have price values for trousers, tunic. Like, do you want us to buy that, or can we be assumed to have clothes on our back?
yeah, I think you can have the pair of clothes that you have, but if you want something special or something like that, you would need to purchase it. And so, for example, if you wanted to have like a ninja suit, for example, like that would be
That's
fine.
not in here. Um, I
Or if you
assume if
wanted to
I
have a
want,
signet ring,
I
something
assume yeah, a
special.
signet wing or a hat. I would think
Yeah,
I would buy. Okay, I just want to make sure. Um, I want it to make sense, not.
I gave you the. I mean, and that always is a little bit tricky because it's like, well, you have to buy every little piece of gear, and I'm sure the intention is that you.
Hey, some people give you guys free horses
Okay, consider favor repaid.
and free boating skills.
True. All true. So yeah, so I think that's it. Um, I think I'm gonna try to work on kind of getting a little bit of an idea as to how, like, I guess now this next part, I did want to talk to you guys a little bit. So like, you have a monk and you have a thief. What kind of adventure were you guys hoping to do? An adventure that involved a 10-foot pole where you had to go down a dungeon and poke every tile to see which ones fell out, or um, what were you guys thinking was the kind of adventure you'd like to try in this system?
I don't really have any preconceived notions. Something that involves me doing thiefy things or being a snarky asshole, which apparently is probably what my character is going to be like, since he's doesn't have any wisdom, doesn't have any intelligence, and is neutral chaotic, which makes him kind of a, like I said, in chaotic it says they may lie just for fun. So that'll be entertaining. My character
Okay.
is ready to make a world of bad decisions and drag the monk along with him.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems like a possibility.
I think the reason that we're probably together is because I don't think my dwarf is probably very popular. He's probably a little bit of an outcast in the society he was born into too. So, like, he probably sees more value in who you are as a person than who you are in your background.
Okay. Well, then
As far as what we're doing, I don't know. Whatever adventuring thing you want us to do.
okay. Well, I'll figure something out then, and maybe if we're lucky, we'll have it by Monday. See.
Uh,
So we'll go ahead and wrap it up there then. About
It was
Less
fun.
than
I
an
think
hour
it'll
to
be
create a character.
I think it'll be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So send us off into the wild blue yonder, guys. How do they talk with us if they don't want to use the comments?
They find us on social media. We are at Rollwise on most platforms. You can also email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
Yeah, feel free to mention us in the comments. Tell us about your Castles and Crusades game, what you love about the game, or other games. Share your stories with us. And as always, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.